And the Prophet ﷺ he's the Nabi al-Ummiyin. He's the Abrahamic prophet that universalizes the covenant. Because they rejected Jesus, and the followers of Jesus go out and universalize the covenant with Gentiles. But they never accepted that. So they never accepted Jesus. And they didn't accept the Prophet ﷺ because he wasn't a Jew. I mean, that's very clear. And the Jews that accepted him actually talk about that and mention that there was envy, and that they did not accept him for that reason. So even what's interesting is some of the Jews accepted him. And the dominant opinion, you can read in Kohler's book, who was a rabbi in Boston. He wrote a book called Jewish Theology, and he has a chapter on Islam. And he says in there that Islam is actually a divinely ordained religion. And he said that is the opinion of the medieval rabbis. But they believed that the Prophet was a fulfillment of a verse in Zechariah where the waters of the Torah would flow unto the Gentiles. And some of the Jewish rabbis saw the Prophet as a precursor to the Messiah, that he was preparing the world for Tawheed, for monotheism. And they also considered, to a certain degree, the Christians doing that, but they did not consider them to be, they only said to the degree with which they take their religion from Judaism. But they reject the Trinity. The Jews have the same attitude towards the Trinity that the Muslims do. I mean, they believe that it's anathema and that it's against. So they don't consider them to be teaching monotheism correctly. Whereas the Jews believe that we are Noahidic people. The Muslims are Noahides, which is, it's nice because in Judaism, they believe that Muslims are saved. They don't believe Muslims are pagans or idolaters, because we're following the Noahidic laws. The Noahidic laws are 7 out of the 10 commandments, and we follow those. And so they believe that we're in a sound tradition. But they say that he's Nabi al-Ummiyin, he's not a Jewish prophet. And that is why in our books of Aqidah, that's mentioned specifically that they're still kafir if they say he's a prophet but not to us. Because that is the position of some of the Jews, that the Prophet ﷺ is a prophet, but not to the Jews. And then many Jews became Muslim historically, and they still become Muslim, which is why it's important to recognize that oftentimes in our books, it makes blanket statements about the Jews. You have to be very careful, because the Arabs, first of all, have a rhetorical device, which they call itlaq al-kull ala al-ba'd, to use a universal for a particular, to use to say everybody when you mean somebody. Like in the Quran it says قَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ غُلَّتْ أَيْدِيهِمْ. The Jews say that God's hand is bound. May God bound their hands. If you read in the Tafsir, Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi said the Jews don't say that. Only one Jew said that. When the Prophet was asking for money, one of the Jews in Medina said, "Oh, is God's hand bound?" He was making fun. To a devout Jew, that's blasphemy to say that. So, unfortunately, a lot of Arabs read these things and they think, oh, that's just the Jews. No, they're devout Jews. They have the same types of laws that we have about talking about God and things like that. So, it's important not to. You just have to be careful reading this literature, the pre-modern literature.